In doing so, they tried to register me with the Prince George's County Board of Education. And in that county, services were also very weak, which is interesting because a close 15, 20-minute drive is Gallaudet University, the world's deaf university. And here, this county was basically saying, well, there's your audiogram, it's very profound, you need to go in special ed. Again! So my grandparents were like, oh no, look at his history, look at where he's been. He's been in an oral school, he speaks, he doesn't use sign language. He's making okay grades, B's and C's, you know, but we attribute that to his hearing loss. But with proper support, with proper intervention, he could really be a good student. Lo and behold, they agreed to that. They put me in the mainstream setting. And my grandmother became a bulldozer. It's funny because when I talked to my dad and my uncles, yeah, she was kind of onto them, but she was way onto me. I could not turn in a homework assignment until she had her eyes on it too. So she went behind me on everything. And she also taught me a lifelong skill that if you're going to start something, finish it. And grandmother passed away 3 years ago, but that's something that still resonates very well with me. But anyway, so I was with them for 1.5 years, and I went from being a B student, C student, to an A student. And so, I mean, it was well within me to perform that well, but I needed people in my life to show me how to do that. My dad, unfortunately, was a C student. Didn't care, went to college, dropped out of college, went to the Air Force. I mean, it's a very different situation. So I had my dad who disliked school, and I had my mother who never graduated from high school. But my grandparents taught me lifelong skills, how to care for education, how to care for myself, and take pride in my work. And also around that time, I asked if I could enroll myself in the Boy Scouts. And I became a scout, Eagle Scout at 15 years of age, even though you can keep going until you're 18 and a half. I was like, no, I'm doing this, I'm on a roll, let's get it done kind of thing. I also asked if I could take piano lessons. One of my earliest memories is I had this old electronic organ, and I used to play that. And I remember how easy it was for me to listen to a song and try to replicate that song. I mean, yeah, I'd have to, figure out how to do that over time. I couldn't read music, but I was like, I had a little knack for figuring stuff like that out. And so my grandparents had a piano in their home. So they said, yeah, let's put you in piano. If I want somebody with severe hearing loss playing piano, which is kind of cool. You don't really see that a lot, but it's totally doable right now, whether you have hearing aids or coherent impairments. So needless to say, in the 6th grade, 7th grade, my grandparents gave me a lot of fantastic tools for life. Dad comes back from the States, he's now stationed in New Hampshire. I go to New Hampshire. If you guys know anything about the history of deaf education, a lot of it happened in the Northeast. So I was in New Hampshire, and my teacher was trained in Massachusetts. Now, in middle school, I still was in the mainstream setting along with everybody else, but the very last period of the day was when all the kids with hearing loss would get together. And that class was designed to help us with homework. If there was no homework, they would come up with activities. And it was the first time in my life that somebody actually sat down with me to teach me what an audiogram was. What kind of makes me mad, because being an audiologist, I'm like, why are we not teaching our kids how to describe their hearing? What does your audiogram look like? How does it impact your life? Can you see that you can't really hear those high pitches, or you can't really hear those low pitches, or you can't hear very much at all? I mean, so for me it was like, wow, I have a better understanding of what's going on, but I didn't learn that until I was in middle school. I think our kids are smart enough these days to learn a little bit younger. Anybody here have an iPad? My daughter's 2.5 years old, and she knows how to use that thing better than I do. So that's my point. I think we can teach them. And the more that they can understand about their hearing loss, I think the better they'll be able to advocate for themselves. So by all means, try to do that. Another thing we did in that group was we went to Gallaudet. We actually sold candy bars, raised money, and we took a trip to go to Gallaudet and learn about some of the options that were out there. Gallaudet is mostly a signing school, but half of the kids in that particular group were signers, and the other half of us were oral. But one point I'd like to make about that is, in my everyday life, even now, my professional life, I rarely use sign language. But I know sign language, and it was something that I learned in middle school, just to communicate with the other half of folks that have hearing loss. And so for me, that opened a social world for me that I didn't previously have. You have to realize that even though I could hear reasonably well, I was in a classroom, a mainstream setting, where everybody spoke, nobody signed, no interpreters, I was still very isolated. I couldn't just eavesdrop in on a conversation that another group of students were having. If we were in a cafeteria, I couldn't really understand what other people were saying at the table. And so, yeah, I was doing fine. Nobody was overly concerned about me, but I wasn't developing socially. Okay? And so in middle school, in this 7th period, I was around other people who had hearing loss. There were some communication differences, but we learned to meet in the middle. I learned how to sign, and they would try to at least say some words, and that ended up being a remarkable experience, because for the first time, I kind of had true friends. You know, it's really interesting. I do have a 2.5-year-old, and it's interesting. You can get two kids together who don't know each other, probably don't communicate very much, but they act like they're best friends, and they've spent a lot of time with each other. And that's kind of how it was for us. In middle school, couldn't really sign, they couldn't really speak, but yet there was a bond there, and that bond was hearing loss. So going to Gallaudet was a terrific experience, because I got to see what that other side was like. Not that I was going to go in that direction, not that I was going to sign myself, but it was the social aspect. And it was being at an institution of higher ed, that there were deaf people who went to college. Imagine that, right? I mean, it seems like a moot point now, but even for me, it was just like, okay, there is something after high school.